Mimi Boa Pissing Ego Shushin Tanshan Simio Pilota Punya Togure Mavali Patama Dana Punya Tamina Hold Pido Mania Sila Punya Malugong Yogone Chizurego Shamjin Absent Gomuno Lady, Josia Gasia, became the Tana Shin. J. Chanja, this is a lady pill. Tila Poya, Jotova, Tayaji. Something that is somewhat Ludai Mavoli Tia Bada Ludai Gavachi, Ludai, Coloma Belumio, so Bebadamio, so Coloma Luyelo Chilla, Solution Luda Pida Chigama Tanakudo Tataniano. Lumapida Devo, Popular Lesser to a Cojedia Mapadero Tila Ponyaga Lunet to Aldua Panditarama. The cases are Jiroche is a Tapsam Puru, Duyabi Matia Yuraro. Kumpaina Kamaki Sari, Lunjura, Lena Yara, Lera, Muesua Tauchu, Younger. Puman sees that a Poguri solution, but you might never come out here. Popular lesser Lue Josie Wago, so you keep Yassi Taluva. I will do the lemon come. Google imagine as a Google lemon canum. Do you lemon canum? The coaches that they are shaved to be a sogare, Julum Hurio. And I will take the payment. Dhamma Luda Pida Bare. Taking a lotion, taking a lot. Punya, penny, Punya, so choosing the senior so that they were Yavara. Gomuno already became of choosing the senior. Lisa died, Nanu died, a chutia. Lisa Mianoma leve di Tila Ponyago leve Tila Taino da Baba Mijoya Odama. Tail out the Bogo ha Lupita Nida Baba. Damlo Chiga, Yejiro Manega Tila Ponyago, Sat Yovido Piotoya Bare.
Punya, or the meritorious deeds which purify and elevate one's existence. Among the three forms of punya, Sayadawgyi spoke about generosity or dana in a general way. And yesterday he began to speak about sila, how by avoiding what is not good to do or say, one's behavior becomes tame. It becomes delightful and gentle and peaceful. This is the purifying act of sila or sila punya. So we arrived at that at this topic yesterday. To avoid that those deeds and speech which should be avoided is something that everyone in the world should know how to do. If one is human, then it is fundamental to become truly human. And generosity will not do this for us, because generosity is not part of moral conduct. It's the good deed of sila punya, which makes a person human. So if we think about it, killing, stealing, various forms of sexual misdeeds, lying, abuse of drugs and intoxicants, these types of acts, if one has to suffer them, one won't want to accept this. These actions destroy one's welfare and one's prosperity. And just as one doesn't want to endure these acts, neither do others. So, if one controls one's behavior and thus refrains from harming others, then this act is punya. It purifies one's acts and speech. And this is quite worthy of respect, making one's action pure in this way. The behavior that results is to be cherished. So one keeps one's sila because one values this clean behavior, and one becomes truly human. So because this is a very important topic, Sayadawgyi began to speak about this yesterday.
Some children have go no julum material who go. Some children are not coming at low. Langi Joaro Punya so that time or the Kum no hurry. Piers a case, a picking Tanshin Dora. Tiro Tanshin a few move yoga. Local lawyer, Lopene, here, local lawyer. Korea, so that our son Katabasa must but be pure may have a shall not tell you. This is a salo body. And our Korea cover. Come no who see JV solution and to get looked at it. Go no yay, Pesha, to get lower Makisa. A look hit of a town shit about it. Luhu town JV solution, Julia Lagaro. Go walk up and since I did come out. Go lady Sijeda, no lady Sijeda. Piosa case, a picanida. Tanshinida, Yinida, Nijanida, Ejana. Really, pure. Take in any very pure, come up your never to do. Come up your 2 jari, pure 2 jari chanda. Suka we say Sadara. Chanda to the yoga. Todo a chigana was the chanda to Tuto go yo come chanda de Talone chanda do Lugina Pukuria Matruemet way pure mea bales or since I am a chigan di lave. Tila Tainavi solution. Go yay, no yay, came it up, go ye to ye. Shushin Tashimu, ye chichi yara. Turbaleve, Sogaya, Mayoto, going Cavalli, Ijanide, Unjing Cavalli, Mimia, Masogaro, Ijanibare, Era Grama, Kava, Ninja, Sipa, Luday, adding Avati, Lonjology, Turi only Kava Ninja. Alega only Bama David, Tarama David Sida. The Koban Cavalli, Ninja Yaolo. Shiga Ninja Yaolo, the Tila Hate Yajiva.
To avoid the violent acts of body and speech, to avoid actions and speech which are to be avoided, is very good work. And the immediate benefit that one gains from doing this is clean, pure, blameless behavior. Clean actions and speech are what should be done, and thus they're called kirya. Kirya means, in Pali, something which has to be done. It must be done. It's not something that can be neglected or put aside. It must be done just the way we need to eat food every day. It is a human being's responsibility to avoid misdeeds. And if one does it, if one avoids these gross acts of body and speech, then what results is that when one reflects upon one's life, one sees that one's actions and speech have become clean. They've become peaceful and gentle. And when one sees this, one feels happy. This is not like the happiness that we get when we enjoy sense pleasures. This is a special kind of happiness, sukha visesa. But this is just the base. This is just the beginning. One who wants special happiness, what is it that they need to do to gain this? First of all, they need to keep sila, because with sila, morality, then coarse behavior becomes clean and gentle, and this is the immediate benefit. Furthermore, others are not violated by our actions or our speech, and therefore one's individual world becomes peaceful. One's environment also becomes peaceful to this extent. If everyone on the planet would keep the 5 precepts, there would be true peace. There's no sense in calling for peace without taking the step of making one's own individual world peaceful by keeping the 5 precepts. So sila is extremely important.
Piro di tila leve Juri Vida Saudi Taraha Pukamara Dari Mujulumabu Tamunga Shawame, Komunga Shawame, Sadi Wali Some Soja Sirina Lady Wali Some Lore Sirina Lady Wali Lady The Walave Elutaya Tata Dai Kamia Oleve Tintiam Song Zis with a volley. Didn't Song Zero. Chichili Titi Lipiamoli, Song Zimuli, and a day Yajiva. Eraha Edel Pipi Solution Mimiko Mimi the Julum Sogavali Misia Ono Sauzi like the Kazero Julum Musudam Zero Sauzi Mu Majulum Tamsiro Pelocon to me a Julum, so to me a Tiga Nana. There is something Majulu, Aka also with a balu, the less or a shake of Luvare, Hiri and Ottappa Luvare. The Yamata Sensaluci, Sayadawgyi U Panditabhivamsa. Here you see the Lord Sayadawgyi U Panditabhivamsa. Burma to ya Matia Maluto, Tata, Chino, Quarter Chino, Kamatongan Chino, Terava, Chopia or Lena Yara Yulam Sinamu, Lega, Chopi, and we say was or Lam Sinamu, that 11 can have I don't. Take you, I don't know, I said, to her.
This sila is better if it's established in advance. One knows in advance that killing, stealing are things not to be done, and one has the intention or the cetana to avoid them. This is what we should establish in the beginning. And having established it, the intention to avoid killing, stealing, adultery, and so on, then one preserves it, one keeps that intention the way it was initially established, so that it becomes very firm. And when our sila is quite firm, well established, then there won't be any violations. One won't violate any of these. One won't commit any violent acts. So this is because one is taking care to restrain oneself. When one commits acts that violate others, then others are harmed. So what is needed for our self-restraint to be strong and good? What is needed are the qualities of moral shame and moral fear. Shame and fear regarding doing misdeeds. And further, one also needs the ability to put oneself in another's place and understand how they feel. And when one has these qualities, then one won't commit any acts of killing. One won't steal. One won't go to the extent of committing adultery, lying, or abusing drugs and intoxicants. So the qualities of moral shame and moral fear are very important.
The Hiri and Ottappa, Makonghu, Makong, Yanzane, Konokita, you Yone the war, Machine on the low. Ottappa Sadaga, Yone the war. Chichita Puni de Tanlo, Kay Puma Solo, Makai, Tiu. That is unit the war, a unit the war, era Luda Pandemia Solution, era she of my era Machida Gu Solution, or Coma level, a genie, Piavito, Druvaro, Mieran Sogani, Erema Ninyam Huri, Pulam Siam Huri, La Rora. That is Hiri and Ottappa Sanjimego. Hiri and Ottappa Kovarenama. A chi yoke go, Mayona. Now, that is Hiri and Ottappa Kavajima, long only, but even a Joseph Comara. Tamalu Kavajiha. Lobari, Longe, Dodari, Longe, Mori, Longe, body. Era miri lumias of Yaga Hogeva, a twin miri body. Emina Nia Kete Mera Toron and Miri Eluhoto Valero Kawaii Miho Tony. atom bomb, hydrogen bomb, or Poviro Pintama, Eddie Bua.
Hiri and Ottappa are the qualities of being disgusted by bad deeds, the way one would be disgusted by feces, and one wouldn't want to pick it up. It's also the quality of fearing, shrinking from performing bad deeds, the way one shrinks from picking up a red-hot iron-burning ball. One shrinks from picking that up because one knows it will burn. Every human being should have these two qualities of shame and fear regarding misdeeds. If one doesn't have these qualities, then one will turn to immoral actions and one will violate other people. Thus, one's own individual world starts to burn. It burns with the qualities of Hiri and Ottappa, the qualities which aren't ashamed to do something wrong, not afraid to do something wrong. And these qualities are now overwhelming the world. Therefore, the internal fires of greed, of hatred, and delusion are burning wildly in the world. And this heat, the heat that is produced by the internal fires, the Buddha called greed, hatred, and delusion, lobha, dosa, and moha, internal fires. The heat that is produced by these is greater than the heat of the atom bomb or the hydrogen bomb.
Eri Jezuri Boma a bit mamina volley, a country now. Era Mohawk or a wizard recover. A bit me a country maro, era the Lecanora. Miadiri yellow, lovely pintana. Maya don't that a yellow she and the city that short Manari Layla. I don't know that beautiful solution or a genetic daughter is a secret. စိတ်ဆိုးတာပေါ့လေမုန်းတာညှိုးတာရက်ဆက်တာဒါတွေပြောလာတာပဲကမ္ဘာလောကကြီးအဲ့ဒါတွေကလွှမ်းမိုးနေပါတယ်အဲ့တော့အနည်းဆုံးအကြောင်းစစ်လိုက်မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အရှိတ်ကြောက်မဲ့လို့အဟိရိကနုတ္တပတရားတွေလွှမ်းမိုးခံရလို့ဆိုတာကဒီမှာအကြောင်းရှာလို့ရပါတယ်ဒါကြောင့်ခွေးတို့ဗုဒ္ဓကျမ်းစာထဲမှာအဟိရိကနုတ္တပအကြောင်းနဲ့အလားကင်းပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လောဘဒေါသမောဟအပူတွေကိုသူကတော့အမြဲတမ်းစုပ်ယူနေတော့တာပဲအပူမိတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကမနေနိုင်ဘူးအပူတီတွေတက်လာပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော်တော်ကိုမနေနိုင်တာပဲဒါလို့ရှစ်ကြောက်မဲ့ပြအပူတံရှစ်ကြောက်မဲ့ပါရှစ်ကြောက်နဲ့တံအပူတံစုပ်ယူတယ်ဆိုတော့ပြောတော့အခုကဘာလောကြီးကဘာသူကဘာသားတွေဟာအရှိတ်ကြောက်မဲ့တဲ့အတွက်အထိန်သိမ်ကင်းပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လောဘပူတွေမိလိုက်ဒေါသပူတွေမိလိုက်မောဟပူတွေမိလိုက်ဆိုတော့ဘာလဲဒါတွေတရားမှာ24နာရီဆိုတော့အိတ်တဲ့အချိန်လေးလို့တက်သွားတယ်ကြံတဲ့အချိန်တွေမှာတော့တခုကတော့ဖြစ်နေတာပဲဒီမှာတွေ့ဝတဲ့မတိမှုတိမမှုမောဟကတော့အမြဲတမ်းတငွေ့ငွေ့နဲ့လောင်းနေတာပဲသူကတော့ဒါပေမဲ့အများစုကတော့ကိုယ်ရင်းမိတွေလောင်နေမှတော့မသိပါဘူး
Not seeing the defects of misdeeds and thinking that they're good is avijja, or ignorance. And when one doesn't see the faults of misdeeds, then one accepts them. And wanting what one doesn't have, one works to get it. And getting what one wants, one feels elated, and then pride follows. If one gets what one doesn't like, then there's dislike, followed by anger, hatred, cruelty. And if one looks to see the cause for these extreme greed, extreme hatred, and ignorance in the world, one sees that it's because of a lack of shame and fear regarding misdeeds. So therefore, in the Buddhist text, this lack of shame, ahiri, and lack of moral fear, Ottappa, it's said that they soak up the heat of greed, hatred, and delusion. And when one doesn't have these qualities of shame and dread, then one becomes very, very hot. So the people of the world have no fear and shame mostly have no fear and shame regarding misdeeds. And so in turn, people are overcome with greed or overcome with anger. And whenever there's greed or anger occurring, there's delusion, moha, occurring. Even when there isn't greed and anger, there can still be delusion. And only when people are sleeping is there any relief from these unwholesome qualities that are burning in the mind. Delusion is always present, but most people don't know that they are burning with these internal fires.
အဲ့ဒီအရှက်မဲ့အကြောက်မဲ့ပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒီကနုတ္တပတရားနှစ်ပါးကိုမြတ်စွာဘုရားကကဏ္ဍလို့ဒီလိုသတ်မှတ်သွားပါတယ်ကဏ္ဍဆိုတာအမဲပေါ့အမဲရောင်ဆိုတဲ့အဓိပ္ပာယ်ပါပဲလူတွေမှာနေပူရဲသွားလို့ရှိရင်အမဲရောင်ဝတ်သွားတဲ့အခါမှာအဲ့ဒီအမဲရောင်ကပူတွေစုပ်ယူတယ်ပူပြီးတော့ပူတယ်မလွဲသာလို့အပူရဲသွားရပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဖြူရောင်ဝတ်သွားမှအဖြူရောင်ကအပူဒဏ်ကန်ထုတ်တယ်အမှန်ပူပြင်းတဲ့တက်ကန္တာတွေကအရော့တီတက်ကန္တာတွေသွားတဲ့အခါမှာအဖြူဝတ်တာကိုကြည့်ပါလိမ့်တယ်မှာပူဒဏ်ကန်ထုတ်ကမ္ဘာလောကကြီးကတော့မိမိရဲ့ပင်ရင်းစိတ်ဓာတ်မှာကအမဲခံထားတာတဲ့အရှက်မဲ့အကြောက်မဲ့အကျက်မဲ့အကြောက်မဲ့ပေါ့လေယုံမှုကဲမဲ့နေတော့အမဲခံနေတော့လောကပြီးရိုးလိုချင်တာနဲ့ငန်းငတ်တဲ့လိုချင်တာတကူအောင်ဆန္ဒအဲ့ဒါစုပ်ယူတော့တကူကောင်းဆံမတော့သူများအကျိုးစီးပွားမလိုလားတော့ဘူးမေတ္တာမထားနေတော့ဘူးဒီတော့မုန်းတိတဲ့သဘောနောက်ပိုင်းကနေရက်ဆက်တဲ့သဘောတွေလည်းပါလာတာပဲအဲ့ဒီဒေါသတွေကိုလည်းပဲအများကြီးစုပ်ယူတော့တာပါပဲမတိမှုမောဟနာရီပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒီဟာတွေဖြစ်နေတာကိုပဲတကယ်ဂုဏ်တရားလို့ထင်မှတ်ပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေလက်ခံထားတာလောဘဒေါသအပြစ်တွေမမြင်တော့အကောင်းထင်တာပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒါတွေရတယ်ပဲလောဘဒေါသမောဟလောဘဒေါသတွေဖြစ်တိုင်းသူကပါနေတာပဲလောဘဒေါသမဖြစ်တဲ့အခိုက်အတန့်မှလည်းပဲမောဟကတော့ဖြစ်နေတာပဲလောင်းနေတာပဲသူကတော့အဲ့ဒါအဲ့ဒီကနုတ္တပခေါ်တဲ့စိတ်မှာအမဲခံရှိနေတော့အပူတွေကိုစုပ်ယူနေတာတဲ့တော့ကဘာသူကဘာသားတွေဟာအများအောင်ဖြစ်အပူတွေဖြစ်နေကြတယ်ရှိကြောင့်နဲ့တအမဲခံပူဒံစုပ်ယူတဲ့အပူတွေစုပ်ယူနေကြတာ
These Dhammas, which are devoid of moral shame, devoid of moral fear, or Hiri and Ottappa, are called Kanha Dhammas. They're Dhammas that are like the color black. If you go into the hot sun wearing black, the black-colored clothing will soak up the heat of the sun. So if one has to go into the hot sun, one should wear white. And if you look at the Arabs when they go into the desert, they wear white. And so looking at this, one can see that this is how to behave. So the people of the world, because of lacking moral shame and moral fear, are as if they are wearing black in the hot sun. Because without shame and fear, then ordinary greed turns into, one follows it, one gives into it, and one's greed becomes extreme. One becomes extremely selfish. And when one is extremely selfish, then one doesn't think at all. One has no ability to care for another person's welfare. Therefore, one can't have a mind of loving kindness. And with that, there comes hatred. Hatred brings cruelty. So dosa, or anger, also soaks up a lot of the heat. And ignorance, or moha, is involved, because people think that greed and anger, lobha and dosa, are good, and they accept these feelings in themselves. So every time that greed or anger, lobha or dosa occur, moha, delusion, is also present. So this is how heat is soaked up by unwholesome qualities, and most of the people in the world are soaking up heat like this.
အဲ့ဒီမကြောက်မရှက်ဘူးမယုံဘူးဟာမိမိကိုယ်ပိုင်ကဘာကလေးကိုလည်းပဲဖြစ်စည်းပလိုက်တာပဲဝန်းကျင်ကဘာလေးကိုလည်းပဲမငြိမ်မသက်ပြုလို့ရရောက်တာပဲမေးချောင်းပြုလို့ရရောက်တာပဲအဲ့ဒါကဘာဖြစ်တရားဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒါအမှန်ပဲလို့ဒါလက်တွေ့ပဲစဉ်းစားကြည့်ရင်ဒီမနာရှင်းပါတယ်လို့လောဘဒေါသမောဟတွေမထိန်နိုင်လို့ကိုယ်ကကျူးလွန်ပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့အဲ့ဒါကိုယ်ပိုင်ကဘာလေးပြည့်စည်သွားပြီဝန်းကျင်ကဘာလေးကိုလည်းပဲမငြိမ်မသက်အောင်ပြုရရောက်ပါတယ်တော့အဲ့တော့ကဘာငြိမ်းချမ်းရေးဆိုတာဘယ်ရတော့မလဲအဲ့ဒီကဘာလေးတွေကိုယ်ပိုင်ကဘာလေးတွေမငြိမ်းချမ်းသူက10 ယောက်လောက်စုတယ်အဲ့ဒီ10 ယောက်စုတဲ့နေရာမှာပူတာပဲအယောက်တရာစုတဲ့နေရာမှာလည်းအယောက်တရာပူနေတာပဲဒီမှာကဘာမှာတော့အဲ့လိုကိုယ်ပိုင်ကဘာလေးတွေလူသားတွေဟာပေါ့လေကိုယ်ပိုင်ကဘာလေးတွေပစ္စည်းတွေများပါတယ်
The qualities of not being ashamed or not being afraid to do wrong are qualities that destroy one's individual world. And they also make the world around one unstable and unpeaceful. This is what is meant by the destruction of the world. When people can't control their greed or can't control their anger, they commit misdeeds which bring about the destruction of their own individual world. And thus the environment also is harmed, those around us. So if we have just one person like that, the situation will be hot. If you can imagine a group of 10 people who are like this, it's worse. A group of 100 people that it's like this, it's even worse. So most people in the world have destroyed their own individual world by immorality.
လူပိသားကိုပြုလုပ်ပေးတဲ့ အခြေခံကျိုးတွေမရှိတော့ဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တယောက်ကစအများကြီးပါလေညာရှိကောင်းတဲ့ဂုဏ်ကြီးတွေထွန်းတောက်တာမရှိတော့ဘူးဒေဝဓမ္မဆိုတာပါလေလူဘဝကိုယ်ဝင်ဘဝပါလေထွန်းတောက်ပြုလုပ်တဲ့အားတွေမရှိတော့ကိုယ့်ဘဝလည်းပဲမေ့မိန်သွားတော့တာပဲတော့
So without also the qualities of Hiri and Ottappa, which make us basically human, they cause us to do our basic human responsibility. Without them, one's own world is not bright. One's own life becomes dull and lacking brightness.
The Hiri and Ottappa ခေါ်တဲ့အကြည့်ရုပ်တွေကိုပေါ့လေယွန်းတက်ပြီးဆိုရင်အဲ့ဒီတရားတွေလွှမ်းလာပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုယ်ရောနှုတ်ကောစိတ်နဲ့စိတ်ထားရောပေါ့လေအပြစ်တွေမရောက်စေချင်တော့ထိတ်နေဒီလိုတပတ်အားကောင်းနေလေထိတ်နိုင်လေပဲထိတ်နိုင်ပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ရှစ်ကြောင့်နဲ့တန်ဖြူခံပူတံကန်ထုတ်စီတော့ဗောလေအဲ့ဒီအရှက်ကြောင့်တစ်ခုကသူကဖြူရောင်နဲ့တူတာ哦ဖြူခံထားတဲ့အခါကျတော့အပူတံကိုသူကကန်ထုတ်ပလိုက်တယ်ပူတံကြည့်အောင်လုပ်ပလိုက်တယ်တဲ့ဓမ္မအဲ့ဒါလိုလည်းပဲမြတ်စွာဘုရားဟောထားပါတယ်
If one has Hiri and Ottappa, moral shame and moral fear, so that one is disgusted by misdeeds and shrinks from doing them, then one controls oneself so that one doesn't commit these actions. And thus one's behavior being pure and clean. These qualities of Hiri and Ottappa are like the color white, clothing that is white, because they reflect heat, they repel heat. And this is how the Buddha described Hiri and Ottappa.
ဒီတော့ဖြူခံရှိထားပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တိလနဲ့ကကုန်းတော်တွေစင်ကြဲနေပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဲ့ဒီပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ဟာလူပြီးသားတာပဲလူပြီးသားအောင်နေတတ်ပြီးအချက်ကြောင့်ရှိလို့ကောကျူးလွန်စော်ကားမှုတွေလည်းပဲမကျူးလွန်မစော်ကားပဲနဲ့ပေါ့လေရှောင်ကျဉ်တဲ့အလေးကောင်းလေးတွေဖြစ်လာပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဲ့ဒီပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ဟာကိုယ်ပင်ကဘာလေးကိုပေါ့လေမပြည့်စည်ရအောင်ထိမ့်သိမ့်ထားတော့တာပါပဲအဲ့ဒီဟေရုဒ္ဓဘာကိုပဲလောကပါဠတတ္တလောကပေါ့လေတတ္တလောကမိမိဟာလည်းတတ္တလောကထဲမှာပါနေတာဖြစ်တော့ကိုယ်ပင်ကဘာလေးကိုမပြည့်စည်ရအောင်ထိမ့်လိုက်တာပဲဝန်းကျင်ကဘာလေးလည်းပဲမချောက်ချရအောင်ကာဝယ်ဆောက်ရှောက်ပြီးသားဖြစ်သွားတယ်အဲ့ဒါလို့တကွက်ကကဘာလေးတွေငြိမ်းချမ်းဖို့အတွက်ကတော့တစုတစုမှာပေါ့လေတယောက်ကစများအနည်းဆုံး၅ပါးသီလလုံခြုံထိရပါတယ်ထိပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဖြူခံထားတဲ့သဘောဟိရိယတ္တပအဖြူခံရှိတဲ့အတွက်အပူဓာတ်ခံထုတ်တဲ့အတွက်အဲ့ဒီကဘာလေးဟာအခြေခံအေးချမ်းတော့တာပါပဲ
With the protection of white-colored clothing, with the protection of Hiri and Ottappa, one's physical and verbal behavior become clean, and one is truly human because of one's behavior. Due to Hiri and Ottappa, moral shame and moral dread, one doesn't commit violent acts, and thus one preserves one's own little world. Therefore, Hiri and Ottappa are called the guardians of the world, Lokapala. because they protect one's individual world. They keep one from committing misdeeds, and thus the world at large is also protected. If there is one person here keeping the 5 precepts, one person there, one group, another group, if there are many groups like this in the world of people keeping the 5 precepts, then we could cover the world with this white protective covering, and the world would be very peaceful. When one's basic morality is complete, then one becomes free of blame from those around one. This is called anavajja. One's behavior becomes faultless. And becoming free of blame and criticism, then one's dignity or one's qualities become improved. Being free of criticism, being free of coarse behavior, one's behavior becomes refined and tamed. So when one avoids actions, killing, stealing, adultery, lying, abuse of drugs and intoxicants, these acts are gross acts of body and speech, and when one avoids them, one no longer receives blame associated with these. Therefore, being free of blame, one also becomes praiseworthy. And from there, one's life becomes peaceful, and in turn, one's environment, also the world around one, becomes peaceful. And this is delightful further. So one by one, our virtues shine. Our qualities as a human become bright, and therefore Hiri and Ottappa are also called Deva Dhammas. They're Dhammas which make our lives shine or bright.
လူမပြီးသားတော့ဝန်းကျင်လည်းပူလောင်ဆင်းရောလှုပ်တတ်တယ်ဆိုတာပေါ့လေအရှိကြောင့်ရှိလေလေကိုရှိစတရားရှိလေလေကိုပင်ကဘာလေးကိုလည်းပဲမပြည့်စည်အောင်ထိမ့်သိမ့်နိုင်လေလေပဲဝန်းကျင်ကဘာလေးကိုလည်းအေးချမ်းလေလေပဲခုကဘာသူကဘာသားတွေအားလုံးထားလိုက်ပါတော့တဝက်လုံးများ၅ပါးတိလောက်လုံးမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကဘာကြီးတော်တော်ငြိမ်းချမ်းမယ်လို့၅ပါးတိလပြည့်ချင်းကြောင့်ရနိုင်တဲ့အဖြစ်တွေတိလပြည့်စုံခြင်းကြောင့်ရနိုင်တဲ့အကျိုးလေးတွေခွဲခြားပြီးတော့သိလို့ရှိရင်အပြစ်တော်တူကိုယုံရတာပဲတိလပြည့်လို့ရရှိတဲ့အဖြစ်တွေယွန်တတ်ပြီးတော့တိလပြည့်စုံလို့ရရှိတဲ့အကျိုးလေးတွေကိုမြတ်လို့တဲ့စိတ်ကလေးတွေပေါ်လိတော့ထားပြရမှာပဝုဒ္ဓနဲ့ပြောမှဆိုအများကြီးရှိပါတယ်ဒါကတော့ဒီတရားဌာနမို့လို့အချင်းချုပ်ပြောရတာပါ
The qualities of Hiri and Ottappa, moral shame and moral dread, moral fear, make the people of the world truly human. And if we don't have these qualities, then one is not truly human, and one turns to acts that make our own world unpeaceful. So, on the other hand, when we have these qualities, we keep our morality and we preserve our own individual world. We also preserve the world around us. So if only half the people in the world, don't even think about if the whole world kept 5 precepts, if only half the world kept 5 precepts, how peaceful it would be. So one should know the faults involved in doing misdeeds and the advantage of avoiding them. And one should come to cherish morality. One should come to cherish the avoiding of misdeeds and cherish not getting the bad results that come, getting the good results that come from keeping good sila. And this is a very brief explanation of Hiri and Ottappa.
Daja Buddha Leteto Karaga Divuta Uga Naswapia Tamo Yaula Vido Megunku Mevare Kinsu Yawajara SADHU Udideo Kaune Yaga Babalefia Yausa Chinga Sabido Ure Tibody Kaune Ya Babale Naswapia Sila Yawajara SADHU Kuji Dilaha Ureti Kauna Puyere Chinga Sabido Tita de Chinga Sabido Ureti and also this on the tea Kauna Kauna to the Dhamma Kauna who yo net to get lowered a Kauma Dilaha Yichi the Kisarima Pani Yichi the Kisarima Saruchi, Chelis and the Tuyavare Chelis a tea. So you have to connote the Abumurego, Shamu Shawame, to the way, Kone Chulumu, no Natulumu, Shamu Shawame, the Malone people. Ne Kore Shawame, Kozamia. Though a chain piece Shawame, a chain mother of Yera, Dao Shawama. Chemi Sura, Junos and a Chomi Soloche, some Simulega in Yokdo, Jamie. Lay a Joya Miara Suragona, Mimi Masisa Gilaluchi, Sosavenga a Jure, Turvatu Masogara, Unchin, Cavaleo, Nija, and Lutari, Eddie Julia, popular sort Lutare, Piso Yame, Chiga Pisoame, Tila, Shitalo, Kona Cheliche, Kaini, Tila, Piso Talo, Teacher Lady and Kaini, Tila, Piso Arabe.
For this reason, in the Buddha's time, a person named Devadatta came to the Buddha and asked him, what is it that is good up until old age? Kensu yawa zara sadhu. And the Buddha replied that it is sila, which is good all our lifetimes, until the very moment of death even. So it is not just good in an ordinary way. It is truly desirable. So it is something that is good for us from the very moment we're born until the very moment we die. And sila, keeping basic morality, is among the most important things that one can do. And this can be shown because it has 4 qualities. There are 4 qualities that mark, or characteristics that mark, something that is very important to do. And the first characteristic is that avoiding physical and verbal misdeeds is something that has to be done. One can't not do this. And the second characteristic is that this keeping of sila has to be done by ourselves. We can't have someone else do it for us. We can't do it by proxy. Third is that it has to be done in time, regularly. That means we have to do it all the time. And it has to be done on time, which means we have to keep ourselves from committing misdeeds when the opportunity arises. So sila is something that has to be done in time and on time. And the fourth characteristic of something that's very important to do is that it brings a lot of benefit. And if you think about the results of keeping sila, the benefits that it brings to oneself, the benefits that it brings to the world around us, one can see that keeping basic sila is a very important thing to do because it has it meets these 4 qualifications.
Jumping at time double, and you come crusade at it. As a chew correct, Cogitia, a time dagger, Maparo, Lungali, Chichi, Pesina. Nangaria Pesides were Lugipita, Tame and Tamia Pesida. By the Lupia, the less of the body, the Sajida Kama. And you go Uzapelu Agilo to the coach Chaluya. The Chadavega, Chiga, Kujitia, Luatia to the body. Through Sora, each you look for the Poyaro, as Chulo Sojamara. Sila, a tainta, wallet of Congo. The tainta community, whoever I do a Congo, so you know. Taita Lombo. The two great Santa de Pogo, I choose out to do your boats in Damimuha. The second I can no material. Let's choose out to do your boats in Damimuha. Consent I can do it to Santa Chetema Power. Let us pray to Gavadari. I got the words of it. The words are Malona Babu, at the Ureka. မေ့လျော့တဲ့အခါယူနံတော့တဲ့အခါအဲ့ဒါတွေကဘာမှအသုံးမကျတော့အခုအချူရှိထားလို့ရှိရင်အခြေခံကိုကြည်တရားတွေရှိပြီးတော့ဗောလေနောက်ထပ်စိတ်ဓာတ်တွေဖွံ့ဖြိုးအတိမှန်တွေတိုးအောင်ကြိုးစားလို့ပြည့်စုံပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ဒီဘဝမှာလည်းပဲလူပြီးသားမယ်ငါးပါးသီလပြည့်စုံတော့လူစိတ်ထားတတ်တဲ့အကျင့်တွေလူသိညာရှိပြီးတော့လူထက်လူဖြစ်တဲ့အကျင့်တွေလည်းပြည့်စုံပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ကမ္ဘာလောကကြီးကဘာလို့အေးချမ်းမလဲဆိုတာပေါ့လေတိတ်တိတ်ချာချာစဉ်းစားပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေအခုဒီမှာလာရောက်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေကိုယ်ပိုင်ကဘာလေးတွေအေးချမ်းအောင်လို့ပြုလုပ်တဲ့နည်းတွေကိုဒီမှာနေတဲ့အခိုက်အတန့်မှာတော့ယူသေးသေးနဲ့လေးလေးစားစားနဲ့ဉာဏ်တို့တန်ဖိုးထားပြီးတော့ရှင်းလောက်တဲ့ဒီအထုနိုင်ကြပါစေလို့လေးလေးနဲ့တိုက်တွန်းရတဲ့ဒီနေ့ဒီမှာတရားအဆုံးသတ်လိုက်ပါရဲ့
So every person in the world should have the ability to reflect and should look at the environment around them. So when people who have looked at the world and have studied the world and society and reflected on it have found that in the past there was a strong emphasis on intelligence quotient, on IQ, and personal qualities, which Sayadawgyi described as SQ, were not included in what people emphasized in teaching their young people. And because of that, the condition of young people these days is that many cannot control themselves. Their behavior is completely out of control. And in examining why this has come to be, it's seen as having come to be because of too much emphasis on worldly education, on IQ, and things like basic morality and good personal conduct, which can be called EQ, Sayadawgyi calls SQ, and in this case it can stand for Sila quotient. These things are needed. These things are very much needed. So in a study that was done of why people succeed, 1,000 successful people were studied, and it was found that in 25% of the people studied, the crucial factor was their IQ. But in the majority, in 75%, the crucial factor was not their IQ. The crucial factor involved personal qualities that can be called EQ, or in Sayadawgyi's case called SQ. And if you think about it, IQ is not something that is good for one's entire life, because when we get old, we may lose our faculties. But when one is strongly established in Sila, if one has this good Sila quotient, then this is very good for one's life, one's entire life. And with Sila as the basis, one can also, with this, if one can also develop the practice so that one can keep one's mind truly human, so that one can have a human mentality, and further, so that one can develop special human knowledge, then one's own individual world will be very peaceful. And Sayadawgyi hopes that the people who have come here to practice will be able to do so with respect and care, cherishing the practice, and may they be able to practice until they reach a satisfactory stage. So Sayadawgyi urges all of you to do this. That's all for today. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.